President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to announce his much-anticipated cabinet, we are told, either tomorrow or early next week, effectively getting the government of national unity off the ground and testing the ostensibly new way of doing politics and governance in South Africa's 30-year-old constitutional democracy. But the ANC is unlikely to let go of the key security and economic cluster ministries, which the DA is reportedly also interested in. So will this create a deadlock, and should the DA have its way in any of the key portfolios, are we likely to see a policy shift? Joining us virtually to discuss this is Dr Dale McKinley, independent political activist and research officer at the International Labour Research and Information Group. A very good morning to you, Dr McKinley. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Sipiwe, to the viewers as well.
When President Ramaphosa was inaugurated on Wednesday and announced the government of national unity, the grumpy rand welcomed the news and rose as high as 17.9 against the US dollar, clawing back its losses after last month's elections, reaching an almost 6-month high. But we need to be careful here, Dr. McKinley. I mean, we've been here before. 5 years ago when President Ramaphosa took over the presidency, triggering a new wave of Ramaphoria and got the markets excited. But do you reckon the rand was trading on positive terrain in response to the announcement of a GNU, or it reacted to the inclusion of the DA in the GNU, which is seen as pro-business?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think the main concern of the market, so to speak, or the investors and the stock exchanges and foreign direct investors, was the fact that they were afraid that there was going to be a government involving the EFF and MK. And when that did not happen, and the announcement was made for the GNU and the other parties, which was, of course, the IFP and the DA mostly, they responded positively, because in their mind, I think, what they see is that the DA, particularly, but also the IFP, are more conservative economically, are more in line with the kinds of market-friendly policies that they would be pushing, and that the ANC would therefore have less room to change policy, so more policy certainty. So I think it's not just about the DA, it's about the policy certainty and the fact that EFF and MK are not going to be part of this government of national unity or the coalition or whatever you want to call it. And I think in that case, it was not surprising that, the rand depreciated. We saw the Joburg Stock Exchange have record days. This is the way the market does. But as you say, it's not something that we can look at for the long term. We have to see, this is a short-term response. It's a reaction, and it should be expected. But what's the hard work really lies ahead in terms of putting together this GNU.
Yeah, sure. Policy certainty is a fundamental facet of any democracy. The fact that South Africa is truly on a knife edge now, with a cloud of uncertainty looming large as the power-sharing deal, is only a statement of intent, and the implementation thereof is a totally different ballgame altogether. So, given the ANC and the DA's vast ideological clashes, how likely will the DA exert its authority and try to push South Africa's politics to the right? And would they have the carte blanche and legal standing to do so?
Well, no, it's not. There's no carte blanche, and they would have no legal standing. It's all a question of what they agree to in this, as you mentioned. The statement of intent is simply that. They still have to thrash out the details of the kind of agreement, and I think they've been quite honest about that. There's a fairly difficult road ahead. But the bottom line is, if you're going to enter into a coalition or a government of national unity, however one wants to call this, with political parties, in this case, the DA mostly, and the IFP, which will give the ANC the majority, then you're going to have to compromise. And compromise means you're not going to be able to get everything you want. So yes, there's going to have to be, DA is going to have to get some ministries, some deputy ministers, so is the IFP, and then you're going to throw a few to the smaller parties like Good, possibly Patricia de Lille might get a ministry or deputy minister. And what's going to be very interesting is to see how they handle the PA, because the PA also wants to get in on home affairs, in particular in the police, which I doubt the ANC will allow.
Yeah.
And so what is going to happen there? But the bottom line is that these are negotiations, and I'm probably fairly certain that we're not going to hear a cabinet announcement today. I imagine our president will take a bit more time, because these are going to be delicate negotiations and they're going to be difficult ones. And it's going to be about who has the most, how should we say, push in those negotiations. But irrespective, the DA is going to get some of these ministries. Whether or not that then results in policy changes, I doubt it. But what you'll probably see is different emphasis, and you'll probably see more different ways of running departments in that case. I think the ways in which departments are run, particularly around cater development and particularly around accountability and transparency, I think the DA is probably going to be much more, how should we say, strict in that case in their counts. But I don't think they're going to win major ideological battles, no.
But then going back to the key word that you just said, compromise. And I suppose compromise is the basic tenet for any power sharing or coalition deal or whatever you might call it. And the DA apparently is now eyeing, amongst others, the Department of Public Service and Administration Department with an oversight role, of course, of reform legislation that will make cadre deployment impossible. You'll remember DA MP Leon Schreiber having campaigned against cadre deployment and even got the Constitutional Court to compel the ANC to make public its complete cadre deployment records. It would now seem the DA would leverage its position in the GNU to fight its battles, not so?
Sure, of course. That's what any political party is going to do. Whether or not they win those battles or whether or not they get everything they want is another matter. But they're certainly going to push. But I think where the key is that they're in this boat now. They cannot jump out of this boat anymore.
True.
So they're going to have to find each other. And there's going to be some argy-bargy. There's going to be disagreements. And let's remember, the DA also, we talk about cadre deployment. But the bottom line is every party who would be in power would engage in some degree of cadre deployment, and the DA does the same. The question is whether or not those people that you appoint into those positions are going to be capable and able to do the kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should look at too much on the issue of cadre deployment, because it's not as if the ANC is the only party that does this. But I think where the real issue is going to be is whether or not, let's, for example, take social development, which has not really been talked about, but which is absolutely crucial given the socioeconomic situation and the social grants that sustain so many people who are in poverty. Now, the ANC would never want to give that up because it's a powerful tool, but here is an area where the DA would probably want to come in. So you're probably going to have quite a bit of contestation over that. Also, as in transport, trade and industry, public service and administration, water and sanitation. We were just listening in the previous half an hour about the crisis in water and sanitation. So these are going to be contested departments, and I imagine we're going to get, just like we did 30 years ago, we're going to get a little bit of a smorgasbord of ministries that go to different kinds of parties. And you might be surprised that some of the smaller parties might be given one or two of the more key ministries, because that would then possibly depoliticize the DA-ANC conflict.
You mentioned some of the departments in contention, but it would seem the ANC is clutching at straws to keep the key portfolios. I mean, it would be so hard to imagine the defense portfolio in the hands of the opposition in any country. I mean, the party also wants to keep the health department, under which the national health insurance falls, which the DA campaigned against, by the way. And the DA is eyeing the role of Deputy Finance Minister, which controls the PIC, which the ANC is unlikely to concede. So, in your understanding of the basic tenets of the GNU, who wields the authority to make cabinet allocations, and can they be challenged?
Well, ultimately, it's the president, according to the Constitution, and we have to recognize that, who has the authority to appoint the cabinet. But in this particular case, it depends upon who is going to compromise and how that GNU agreement, that statement of intent, is going to be actualized. And we don't know. We're obviously speculating. But the bottom line is that there's going to have to. So here would be some kind of prediction that, yes, I would agree that the ANC is not going to give up defense. It's not going to give up international relations. It's not going to give up justice and correctional services. It's not going to give up finance. And it's iffy whether or not it would divide minerals and energy, for example, and whether those would be hived off. Public enterprises is another key one that could be up for grabs. And then some of the other ones, as we've mentioned, that are in the service sector, for example, in terms of transport, the local government and cooperative governance, trade and industry. These would probably be more ones that would be up for grabs. But in terms of the power relations and who's going to get what, we're sitting here speculating and we just don't know. But it's going to be a mix. It's a question of what mix that is. And I think in this case, what we're going to see is and people don't, it's new for us for 30 years. We haven't had this situation where the ANC is having to make these compromises. So we don't really know how far they're willing to go. But my sense is that they're willing to go as far as it's necessary to keep the GNU intact. And I think that's going to be the bottom line. How far that is in terms of the key ministries, I'm not quite sure, but I think they're going to have to give up some of them. And even if they don't give up the ministers, they would certainly have to give some deputy ministers to some of those key ministries in order to keep the GNU intact. Because if they don't, then the GNU doesn't really mean much.